There are any number of exegetical, interpretive, and theological issues in Romans chapter 5, but there are two prominent ones that I am going to overview in this video. One is in Romans chapter 5, verse 1 at the very beginning. One is in Romans chapter 5, verse 12, towards the middle of the chapter. So let's go ahead and jump on in. With respect to our first one, Romans 5:1, as I have rendered it here, reads, "Therefore, since we are justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ." And what I want you to do is take a quick pause here, pause the video, grab a printed Bible if you have one nearby, or jump onto Bible Gateway or Step Bible and do a quick translation comparison for the phrase "we have peace." See what different kinds of translations you find for "we have peace." All right, we're going to continue the sort of lecture pause here, your active engagement with this video that's, of course, so good for your learning. And I want you to spot the difference between these two sentences in Greek. Even if you don't know Greek, you can do this activity. You can find the one letter that is different between the two phrases. So just compare each single word until you find the word that is different between the two. All right, I'm sure you nailed it, so we should high five for that. 1, 2, 3, high five. The difference here is between the single letter that looks like an English O and an English W here. This is a Greek omicron, little o micron, and a Greek omega down here, big O, omega, big O. And this is a difference that changes the meaning of the verse. It changes the meaning of the verb. When you have the omicron, the letter that looks like an English O, this is in the indicative mood. The verb, this is a verb, is in the indicative mood. And what the indicative mood does is it indicates something. It indicates what is a fact, a thing that already is. So with ἔχομεν, which is the first highlight up there, with the omicron, or the English looking O, we have Paul stating a fact. Paul is stating the fact that we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. If the word is not spelled with an omicron, and if it's spelled with an omega, what looks like the English W, then it changes the mood of the verb to the subjunctive mood. And what the subjunctive mood does is it is the mood of possibility or probability. It doesn't necessarily state something that is necessarily so. It doesn't indicate a fact the way the indicative mood does, but it says something that might be. And it says, it gets at that potentiality or that possibility of the verb in different kinds of ways. And one way to do it, especially in the first person plural being we, when we see a subjunctive in the first person plural, it's a sort of call to action, what is called a hortatory subjunctive, exhorting a certain kind of action. So if the verb here has the omega, then Paul is saying, let us have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. So because we have been justified by faith, let us have peace. So the having peace is not indicated. It's not necessarily the case. It's not a stated fact, but it is a possibility. It is something that one can have, and Paul is encouraging that kind of action. So our different translations here would be with the indicative. Our first option, we have peace. Our second option would be, let us have peace. And so for the first option, it's sort of as though, theologically speaking, peace with God is simultaneous with justification, that it's a sort of result of that first clause. Having been justified by faith, we have peace. So the justification happens and the having peace happens as a corollary to that. And the second option, if it is a subjunctive verb, then peace with God is a separate act that is sort of opened up because of the justification bit that comes in the first clause. There's not as close of a connection. There's not a statement of the fact that peace happens right away when justification happens. Justification is a thing, and urging to peace comes as a result of that justification in the second option. And the difference here is an issue of what is called textual criticism. So if you're a Greek exegesis student, this word should be familiar to you. We're engaging it this particular week. But textual criticism is sort of the study of what different manuscripts read for particular verses. So in this particular verse, some manuscripts have that indicative verb, we have peace, and some manuscripts have the subjunctive verb, let us have peace. And so textual criticism is sort of going to weigh those manuscripts and the reasons for the changes and determine why those changes might have arisen. And some textual critics are going to say, and we need to figure out which one is older, which one is the original reading. Though that is not what all text critics think we ought to do. So all this to say, we have both options on the table. In manuscripts, there is both the indicative and the subjunctive. And there's several different ways a change one way or the other, either from the indicative to the subjunctive or from the subjunctive to the indicative, could have entered into the manuscript traditions. And at the end of the day, most English translations opt for the indicative. For a number of different reasons that we won't talk about in this video. But most say that Paul has in mind, or the best reading of this passage is that having peace is sort of part and parcel of the justification bit that's in the first phrase of Romans chapter 5, verse 1. But there are some translations, as you may have found in our little lecture pause, that do not have that do in fact have the subjunctive, have the encouragement to peace. So this is an exegetical issue that you will find discussed at greater length in the commentaries, in the books, and the materials for this week, whether or not Paul uses a subjunctive verb encouraging peace, or whether he uses an indicative verb stating that peace is already a thing. All right, one more exegetical issue. This one, another 11 verses down in Romans chapter 5 at Romans 5:12. Once again, I have reproduced the Greek, even if you don't know Greek, and I have produced what I call the ELT, the Elder Literal Translation. This is not to say that this is the translation I would go with for this particular verse, but it is a way for me to present the text to you very literally. So because of this, just as sin entered the world and through sin death, so also to all humans death came, upon whom or which all sinned. May make no sense. It shouldn't make no sense because it is too literal. I have not made some interpretive decisions to make it clear. Remember, translation is always also interpretation. I have not made those interpretations that I would have to make in order for the meaning to be clear. And the key issue here, or the sort of the sticky wicket, the sticky exegetical wicket, as it were, is this little phrase "ho." In Greek, right up here, which I have translated upon whom / which. And the issue here is what exactly is sort of, going on with this particular phrase. And there's a couple different options. What it is grammatically speaking is a relative clause. What a relative clause does in any language is relate one thing to something else. And so the question then is what is this relative pronoun ho relating to something that came previously, if it is in fact a relative clause. We're going to get another major option after this. If it's relating to something previously, normally it's going to be, or grammatically speaking, the best guess is the thing closest to it. And the thing closest to it in the verse here, the noun closest to it that matches it, for those of you in the Greek class, in gender and in number, but not necessarily in case, because a relative pronoun changes its case based on its function in a clause. The thing that matches it most closely in gender and in number is going to be thanatos. That is the word death. So it could be, so also to all humans death came, upon or through whom, through death, all sin. So in this case, it's sort of death's fault that all people sinned. Another option, going further back, it could be relating, the relative clause could be related to the world, so that it could because of the world, though it's the world's fault, the fact of living in the world, that all sin. The last one, and excuse me, I'm just noticing my non-gender inclusive language here with man. It could be humanity. The word anthropou earlier in the verse, at the very beginning of the verse. That it'd be because of the one man, the one human, Adam, that's probably presumably why I put man there rather than humanity. Through the one man, Paul has Adam in mind, that all sin. So a couple different options. for our relative pronoun here. So if Paul is relating in these two little words to something else in the passage, and that is the reason which all sinned, or sort of the root of all sin. There are three options for the root of all sin: either death, or living in the world, or the one man, one human, Adam. The other major option is that the whole phrase, ho, while technically a prepositional phrase with a relative pronoun, can function together as sort of like a conjunction that means since or because. And so in this sort of way of interpreting these two little words and interpreting the verse, that all sin because, all sin because of the previous stuff. Just as sin entered the world and through sin death, so also to all humans death came. Death came to all humans because all humans sinned. So that's the other sort of main option, that it's not this all people sinning is not necessarily rooted in death, the world, or Adam, but the all people death coming to all people happens because all people sin, that there is no exception, all people sin, and therefore death comes to all. So to sum it up here, sort of the central question in this second exegetical issue is whether death enters because all humans sin, that is death the result of each individual human sinning, that when sin happens, death comes into that through that human, and humans sin without exception? Or is the root of sin something different in this clause? Does the root of sin come from death itself, from being in the world, or from the first human being, Adam?